In this video, we'll be taking a look at 4 NBA games happening on February 5th, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 8 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 4 NBA games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start: if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Washington Wizards versus Detroit Pistons. The Washington Wizards head to Little Caesars Arena to face the Detroit Pistons on Thursday night. The Wizards are coming off a small roller coaster stretch with a solid win over the Kings followed by a loss to the Knicks, and they have the Nets waiting on deck. They have dropped 40 of their last 55 games, which tells you how rough this longer run has been, even if there have been a few encouraging nights sprinkled in. The Pistons, on the other hand, have stacked some real momentum, taking down the Nuggets and the Nets recently, and they also see the Knicks next. They have won 21 of their last 29 games, which reads like a team that has figured out what works and is mostly sticking to it. In terms of personnel, the Wizards are still without Trey Johnson, Cam Whitmore, Trae Young, and Anthony Davis, so their margin for error stays pretty thin. The Pistons have ruled out Dennis Jenkins, and they are monitoring Cade Cunningham and Tobias Harris, both listed as questionable, so there is at least a bit of uncertainty there. Even with that, the overall situation feels very different for each side. The Wizards did put together some decent basketball before that blowout loss to the Knicks on Tuesday, which makes them a bit tricky to fully write off, but the reality is they were always going to be heavy underdogs in this kind of matchup. The Pistons are playing like one of the hottest teams in the league right now, and their recent form suggests they can handle this spot comfortably, with or without Cunningham in the lineup. Checking lineups before tip-off still matters, especially if you are watching for late news on Cunningham or Harris. But the performance gap between these teams over the last few weeks is hard to ignore. Given how both trends and injuries line up, this shapes up as another spot where the Pistons can lean on their current rhythm and pull away for a comfortable win rather than a nail-biter. As our first pick for this matchup, the Detroit Pistons to win and cover the spread as favorites is our full-game side pick. The Wizards are averaging 112.1 points on 45.7% shooting while allowing 122.7 points on 47.6% shooting, which shows a pretty clear pattern of giving up more than they get on most nights. They are hitting 35.4% of their threes and 77% at the free throw line, and they pull down 43.9 rebounds per game. They also allow opponents to shoot 36.5% from deep, which can really punish them when they run into a team that gets hot from the perimeter. The Pistons are putting up 117.5 points on 48% shooting and holding opponents to 110 points on 44.1% shooting, so their recent profile looks more balanced on both ends. They are shooting 35% from long range and 75.3% at the line, and they collect 45.7 rebounds per game, giving them a small but meaningful edge on the glass. They allow 34.6% shooting from beyond the arc, which is noticeably tighter than what the Wizards give up and can quietly drag scoring down when possessions turn into contested looks instead of wide-open ones. Putting these numbers side by side, you get a matchup where the scoring averages look fairly healthy at first glance, but the defensive splits and rebounding edge point to stretches where shots may not fall as freely as the raw points per game might suggest. If the game tilts into a more controlled rhythm, with the stronger defense closing out on shooters and cleaning the boards, that can bleed seconds off the clock and limit second chance points. Even if there are short bursts of offense, there is a real path where the shooting percentages settle into something a bit more modest over 4 quarters, rather than turning into a full track meet from start to finish. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Brooklyn Nets versus Orlando Magic. Orlando walks into this matchup in that classic prove-it kind of spot. Back at home in the Kia Center, opening up a stretch in their own building after getting blown out in Oklahoma City, they see a Brooklyn group that has been stumbling for what feels like forever. Brooklyn has dropped 9 of its last 10 and has fallen in 13 of 16 since the calendar turned, and that kind of skid sticks to a locker room, even if no one wants to say it out loud. The standings paint the same picture you feel when you look at these two. Brooklyn sits at 13-36 near the bottom of the conference, while Orlando is at 25-24, sitting in that messy but hopeful middle tier. On top of that, the Magic have taken care of business in front of their own fans with a 14-9 mark at home, and that building has started to feel like a place where opponents brace for a run in the second or third quarter. The Nets, on the other hand, are not just losing, they are getting hit with those demoralizing results, like the 53-point loss to Detroit and the game where the Lakers were up by 22 before the first quarter even closed, and that kind of pattern starts to live in the back of a team's mind. Injuries do not make the hill any easier to climb. The latest league report has Orlando missing Franz Wagner again along with two-way big Colin Castleton, while Brooklyn is without Cam Thomas plus depth pieces Tyson Etienne, Haywood Highsmith, Chaney Johnson, and E.J. Liddell. Every one of those names is tied to these rosters right now, and Thomas in particular matters because he is one of the few Nets who can actually bend a defense with the ball. So the Nets' already fragile scoring picture takes another hit, while the Magic lose some creation and spacing but still keep a deeper core in place. Against the spread, the story gets a little weird, and honestly that is where a lot of bettors start to talk themselves in circles. Orlando sits at 19-30-0 overall against the number and 0-1-0 when asked to lay a really big margin, which does not exactly scream automatic. Brooklyn floats around the break-even line at 23-23-3, and they are 5-6-1 when catching a big amount of points. So on a sheet of paper, the historical trend says Orlando does not always reward people who trust them, and Brooklyn can be feisty. But that is the trick here. Those records fold in nights with very different versions of these teams, and what matters most is the current form where Orlando still looks like a roughly average group by point margin while Brooklyn has sunk into a pattern where almost every night feels like an uphill climb from the opening tip. Style and mood pull in the same direction. Orlando leans into size, physicality, and that slow squeeze over 4 quarters, which plays up even more when the crowd senses a chance for a get-right game at home. Brooklyn arrives with an offense that has been the least productive in the league by scoring, sitting a little above 100 points per game recently, and now has to lean heavily on Michael Porter Jr. while he is hearing his name pop up in trade chatter. That is a tough ask, no matter how talented he is, because it invites long stretches where everyone else becomes a spectator on offense and the defense cracks first on the other end. So you have a frustrated but still sturdy home team that can send waves of bodies, and across from them a road team that has been blown out repeatedly and now has even less reliable scoring. As our first pick for this matchup, the Orlando Magic to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Full season numbers suggest more points than people might expect, since Orlando averages about 115 points for and just under 116 against, while Brooklyn sits a bit above 107 for and almost 115 against, and those raw figures hint at plenty of points floating around. That is the funny part. The big picture math nudges you one way, but the present versions of these teams pull you back the other way. Orlando will once again be without Franz Wagner, and that matters a ton for how the offense feels possession to possession. Without him, more creation funnels through Paolo Banchero and Desmond Bane, which is not a bad thing for talent, but it often slows the rhythm and leads to more deliberate half-court sets. So instead of a constant flow, you get more structured touches, more post work, more isolations, and that naturally shaves some possessions off the game. It is a little like switching from a fast, casual spot to a sit-down restaurant. The food might be better, but you are going to be there longer. Brooklyn's scoring funk pushes things in the same direction. This is the lowest scoring offense in the league by points per game, and over the last 10, the Nets have only managed around 100 points per night. On the road, they barely crack 104. With Cam Thomas out and several rotation-level guys unavailable, the Nets are even more reliant on tough shot-making from a small group, which is rarely a recipe for an offensive breakout. Pace-wise, both teams sit in that middle to slower band, with Orlando around the league average in possessions and Brooklyn trending even slower during this rough stretch, so neither side is trying to turn this into a track meet. Recent meetings between these two support a lower scoring script. Their first matchup this season finished at 105-98, and the second landed at 104-103 even with overtime, both sitting well under what you might expect when you hear modern offense. On top of that, Brooklyn has been a strong under-team against Eastern Conference opponents lately, with most of those games finishing below the projected scoring line, which lines up with how their offense has looked. Put all of that together, and what emerges is not so much a fireworks show as a methodical kind of night, where one side settles somewhere in the low to mid-100s and the other struggles to escape the high 90s or just over that mark. It is still basketball, so anything can happen, but given the current form, the injuries, and the way both groups are leaning stylistically, backing a quieter scoreboard feels much more reasonable than suddenly expecting both offenses to catch fire at the same time. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Chicago Bulls versus Toronto Raptors. Chicago walks into this matchup as the underdog, and you can almost hear the casual fan shrug already. Toronto has the cleaner record, the home floor, the bigger name value right now, so the instinct is to treat this like a simple, strong favorite against a team that is just trying to hang on. The problem with that story is that Chicago does not really play like a timid road team that wants to slow things down and keep it respectable. This group likes chaos. The style leans into pace, long rebounds, and wild swings, the kind of game where a double-digit lead can vanish in what feels like 2 Spotify songs. The roster shakeups only feed that energy. Steady veterans have been swapped out for more aggressive guards and longer, bouncier forwards who are not shy about putting the ball on the floor or letting it fly if a defender blinks. That is not the personality of a team trying to crawl through a half-court rock fight. It is the personality of a group that is fine living with risk, because risk cuts both ways when you are catching a healthy spread. Young cores with something to prove rarely walk into these spots thinking about damage control. They walk in thinking, if we get hot for 6 or 7 minutes, this whole thing flips. And that mindset matters when you are talking about covering, not just winning outright. On the other side, Toronto is very good, but not untouchable. The season has had pockets where they look like a machine, and other pockets where the defense leaks a little more than the box score suggests, especially when the schedule starts to stack games close together. A busy stretch plus the responsibility of being the team that is supposed to control everything can wear on legs and focus, and that is exactly where a fast, loose underdog becomes annoying in the best possible way. A slightly thinner interior rotation and a new big body still figuring out his exact role can turn simple boards into scrambles, and scrambles are where underdogs catch fire or at least keep the scoreboard ticking on both sides. Chicago, with its mix of length on the wings and downhill guards, is built to keep swinging in those broken play moments instead of fading. Even the injury questions that hover around their backcourt tilt the style toward more attacking and improvisation, not less, which again is frustrating for a favorite that would love a quiet, controlled evening. Everything lines up for Chicago to play free, take the kind of shots that stretch a defense, and use that energy advantage to hang around inside a pretty generous number, even if the game tilts toward Toronto on the scoreboard itself. As our first pick for this matchup, the Chicago Bulls to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Both teams are far more comfortable in games where the ball is moving, bodies are cutting, and transition chances pop up off of long rebounds or deflections. Chicago in particular has settled into an identity where you blink and there have already been 3 possessions, almost like those pickup runs where nobody wants to be the person who slows things down. That naturally stretches totals because every empty trip is quickly followed by another shot, and misses from the outside often turn into easy runouts the other way. Toronto is not some grind-it-out, walk-it-up group either. Their main creators like to attack off the dribble, pull up from mid-range, and step into threes if a defender goes under, which means a lot of quick decisions and a lot of early clock looks. That kind of offense may miss sometimes, but it very rarely kills time, and when both teams embrace that tempo you get long stretches where the scoreboard feels like a live feed, not a still image. It is almost like watching 2 different bands who both prefer up-tempo tracks. You might not love every note, but nobody is playing slow ballads here. Chicago's defense adds another little twist. This is not a unit that chokes off space and turns games into 50-50 balls in the paint. There are gaps, there are transition chances, there are fouls when someone gets beat off the dribble. For a total, that is secretly a feature, not a bug. Trips to the line stop the clock, and opponents who feel comfortable getting to their spots tend to keep attacking instead of settling. Pair that with a front line that is more mobile and switchable than it is bruising and imposing, and you get a recipe for drives, kickouts, and the kind of rhythm that keeps both sides hunting points rather than trading empty trips. The building itself usually has a good offensive vibe, and when a home team leans into that energy, the visiting side often follows, especially one like Chicago that already prefers a higher tempo. If Toronto jumps out in front, Chicago has every reason to keep pushing because that is how they claw back. If Chicago surprises and sticks their nose in front, Toronto has the talent and shooting to crank things up in response. Either way, the most likely version of this game has long stretches of trading makes, some late whistles, and very little interest from either side in turning this into a slow, cautious chess match. All of that together paints a picture of a game where offense, pace, and style all nudge the scoreboard upward, with both teams doing their part to keep the numbers climbing rather than stalling. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Utah Jazz versus Atlanta Hawks. The Utah Jazz roll into State Farm Arena trying to stop the bleeding against an Atlanta Hawks team that has quietly picked up some momentum lately. The recent form could not feel more different. The Jazz just lost to the Raptors, squeezed out a win over the Pacers, and now have the Magic on deck. Yet that does not change the bigger picture that they have dropped 15 of their last 19 games. That kind of stretch wears on a locker room, even if the box scores sometimes suggest they are hanging around. Atlanta comes in from a similar short run in terms of schedule, falling to the Pacers, bouncing back against the Heat, and then looking ahead to the Hornets next. The difference is that they have actually been stacking some positive results, with 5 wins in their last 7, which naturally makes them look like the steadier side right now. Even with all the usual trade chatter swirling around this roster, they have shown more life than many expected, almost like the noise has given them a bit of an edge. Injuries still shape a lot of what we should expect. The Jazz remain without Kevin Love, Elijah Harkless, and Keontae George, so their rotation is thinner than it should be, and it forces role players into bigger spots than they are built for. On the other side, the Hawks are monitoring Onyeka Okongwu and Kristaps Porzingis, both sitting in that uncomfortable gray area of being listed as questionable, which can mess with game planning and matchups. The number being asked on this contest feels big, but given how Utah has been sliding while Atlanta has perked up, it is not exactly shocking. Here is the thing, though. This is another inflated NBA line where the better team can still be the wrong side against the spread. The Hawks may very well win this game outright, but that does not mean it is wise to lay a hefty number with a group that will likely be shorthanded after a trade, and that has struggled to build a real home court edge, as shown by how often they have slipped up in their own building. They are not some unstoppable force at State Farm Arena, and the market often prices them as if they are more reliable than their actual results suggest. Utah, for all their issues and that long losing run, has quietly been a positive story against the number, sitting at 27-24 against the spread, which means that blindly backing them this season has not exactly been a bad habit. This will already be about the 10th time since April that Atlanta has been asked to cover as a sizable favorite, and there comes a point where you just say enough and take the points with the team that the market keeps discounting. As our first pick for this matchup, the Utah Jazz to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Utah is averaging 118.3 points on 46.8% shooting, which shows they can score in bunches when the offense flows, even if it does not always look pretty possession by possession. They are hitting 35% from 3 and 79.9% at the line, so the shooting is respectable, and they grab 43.7 rebounds per game, which helps them generate extra looks. The flip side is rough. They are giving up 126.9 points on 49.2% shooting and allowing opponents to knock down 37.8% of their threes, so their games often look like track meets where stops are optional. Atlanta sits in a very similar scoring lane, putting up 117.4 points on 47.3% shooting while allowing 118.3 points on 47.6% from the field. They shoot 37.3% from deep and 77.3% at the stripe, and they pull in 42.3 rebounds a night, which is solid but not overwhelming. They do defend the three slightly better than Utah, holding opponents to 35.5%, and that small difference on the perimeter can matter when both offenses lean heavily on spacing and outside shots. On paper, those numbers scream offense, but totals often come in a bit high when the market sees two defenses allowing this many points. Sometimes that leads to a slower actual rhythm than people expect, especially if tired legs, travel, or tighter rotations nudge both coaches toward more half-court sets and fewer wild runs. If either side even slightly cleans up in transition defense or limits second chance looks, the scoring can come down just enough to land under a number that has been inflated by the perception of constant fireworks. With both teams already carrying reputations for high-scoring outings, there is a good chance the bar is set higher than the actual flow of this game will support. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.